Hello again. Today we are going to make brownies. What can you say about brownies? Everybody loves them and everybody thinks, oh, brownies are so hard to make. I'm going to let you in on a little secret. They're not very hard because there's two ways to do it. Either you go buy a box, which calls for you to dump the contents of the box into the bowl, add a little bit of oil, add a couple of eggs, stir it a little bit, pop it in the oven, and you're done. That's the easiest way. It's not the way we're going to do it today. The slightly more difficult yet oh so satisfying way to make a brownie is to start from scratch. And so today I'm going to teach you how to make brownies, chocolate brownies from scratch. Brownies are a staple on the American table. They are great to take to potlucks. They are customizable. I'm going to tell you a little bit today how to take this basic chocolate brownie recipe and make it in a way that anybody that you know will like it. Unless if that person doesn't like chocolate. But there's even a brownie for them. They're called blondies. Look them up. They're pretty good too. Today though, it's the chocolate brownie that we are focusing on. And you don't really need a whole lot to make it. In fact, you probably have most of these ingredients already at home. Of course, with the chocolate brownie, one of the things you're really going to need to have is chocolate. And there's a couple ways that you can do it. We're going to actually today make our brownies with a chocolate powder. Now make sure this is very important. This is without sugar chocolate. If you buy the kind that's like the stir it up with a little bit of milk and drink it as hot cocoa, it's going to make a really, really bad brownie. So when you go to get this, make sure it's an unsweetened chocolate. Now, you can start with either this powder or the other way that some people in the States will use is with baker's squares. And this is actually preformed chocolate, sort of similar to if you would go out and buy like a chocolate bar, but without the sugar. The difference here is fat. There's already fat in this, there's no fat in this. So these make a pretty creamy brownie, but you don't need them. If you just have this powder, it makes the exact same thing without the fat. So we're going to start with this today, make our brownies just a little bit more healthy. But chocolate's a healthy thing, right? You're also going to need flour and granulated white sugar. You can use the heavily granulated, or this is sort of the more fine version. It's up to you. The consistency of the brownies will change just a little bit. I prefer to have the more finely granulated, but if all you have on hand or all you can find is the more coarsely granulated sugar, that's fine. It's not going to hurt anything. You're also going to need a little bit of baking soda and salt. These are going to be our dry ingredients. For our wet ingredients, 2 eggs, some vanilla, and some melted butter. And just a note on the vanilla, sometimes vanilla is pretty hard to find. And I looked it up last night, and did you know that maple syrup is actually a really good switch for vanilla? So if you can't find vanilla, find some maple syrup, switch them in teaspoon for teaspoon, and it's probably not even going to make a big difference in the flavor of your recipe. The final thing you're going to need is your customizable add-ins, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit. The nice thing about a basic brownie recipe is that it should be a one bowl recipe, meaning that you can just put everything into this one bowl, stir it all up, and then just put it into your one pan. That also minimizes your total cleanup that you have to do. So what are you going to do first? Well, first of all, you are going to put your cocoa, and this is going to be about 3/4 of a cup of cocoa, and then you're going to put in a little bit of your baking soda. Now you might be asking, I've heard about baking soda, I've heard about baking powder. What's the difference? The answer to that is good question. People argue this all the time. They're both used in helping things to rise. So if you don't want flat brownies or flat cookies, you want to put these things in there. What's the difference on when do you use one or when do you use the other? I don't know. That is the answer to that question. So sorry if that was a burning question that you had. So you're going to put your cocoa and your baking soda in here, stir them up just a little bit. And then after that, you are going to add something that I forgot to tell you that you're going to need, which is going to be some boiling water. I happen to have my handy dandy little water boiler back here, but if you don't have that, just stick a pot on the oven or on the stove and let it set for a little bit. Don't burn your hands, which I just did, and put your water in with this. And you're going to stir it up. You're also at this time going to add in another of your dry or wet ingredients, and you're going to add about half of your butter. And again, remember when I told you about the way that we do it in the States, where we have those the bricks of the chocolate that we melt. Right here, this is just sort of you're simulating those bricks. You're adding in the fat to the chocolate, and that's going to help make these brownies really creamy and fudgy and amazingly delicious. So you're just going to mix this in. The reason you only add a little bit of your butter at this time is that you want to make sure that you're not getting your brownie too wet or too dry all at the same time. It makes it easier to incorporate things if you don't have just tons of water sludging around, but then also if you don't make it too dry. In other baking, a lot of times you'll add in all the dry ingredients and then later add in all the wet ingredients. But with brownies, and especially when you're working with the cocoa powder, it's easier if you just kind of mix things up in stages. So you're just going to mix it up, and you can already smell it. This smells amazingly chocolatey. So once this is smooth, then you're going to add your eggs. There's lots of thought out there about whether you should crack the egg directly into the bowl or crack it into another one. If you're good at cracking eggs, you can crack it directly into the bowl. If you're not so good at cracking eggs, or if you always end up with that one little piece of the shell that you're just digging around in there, you might as well just crack it into another bowl. And so that's what I'm going to do. So, trick to cracking eggs. Some people can do it one-handed. I can't. I haven't practiced it enough. But just a light tap on the surface should do it. And then use your thumbs, pry the egg apart, and do it that way. Now, if your recipe calls for just the egg white or the egg yolk, at this point, instead of opening it up and letting it fall out, that's when you start going from side to side. Keep that yolk in the eggshell, and the white will fall out. Maybe sometime we'll use a recipe that's going to show that. So, 2 eggs, shell-free, hopefully. And we're just going to put them in there, and you're going to continue to stir. And again, we're not adding too much liquid, but we are going to get pretty liquidy here. So in just a minute, we're going to add in our flour. Different brownie recipes are going to call for really similar amounts of the chocolate. The eggs are going to differ between 2 to 4. The soda, that's going to stay the same. But what's really going to change in the different recipes is going to be the sugar and the flour. Brownies, there are 2 schools of thoughts on brownies. You can either make fudgy brownies or cakey brownies. Fudgy brownies are going to be sort of the more dense, moist brownies, and cakey brownies are going to be slightly drier and more like the cake that you might enjoy making and eating. I personally prefer a fudgy brownie, and that's what we're making today. If you prefer a cakey brownie, really simple, add more flour. That's it. So we're going to put in the flour right now, and all we need for flour in this recipe is going to be 1 1/4 cup. And so you can do this with any measuring cup. It does not make any difference. I prefer this one because I can see through it and be able to tell it got just a little bit too much. So just dump that out and pour it in. And secret here, don't add it all at the same time because it makes it really hard to put it together. And if you add it all at the same time, you're going to end up stirring and getting flour in your face. And then you'll sneeze, and then it's just not as fun. So go ahead and just add in half of your flour, stir it until it's pretty incorporated. Make sure that if you're using a square bowl like I am, that you're getting it all out of the corners. The worst thing is when you're pouring this out and you end up having flour still unincorporated into your batter. Not fun at all. So add that in, add in the second half of your flour, and you're going to keep incorporating. Now you're going to notice that this is getting pretty dry, and so at this point, if it's a little bit too hard to stir in, remember all that leftover butter that we had? This is a good time to add your butter. So again, usually with recipes that for things like cookies and cakes, you're going to do all the dry ingredients and then all the wet ingredients. Not for brownies. It's better to alternate like this. So here we go. Keep mixing it in. That butter will, and make sure your butter is melted when you start out. That will make your life a lot easier. If you don't have melted butter, then you're going to be dealing with clumps of butter, and especially butter straight out of the fridge is really, really tough. Now, so clearly this is not going to be very good brownie, so we're going to have to add a little bit more liquid here with our vanilla, or remember, could be maple syrup if you have that instead. But also, right now, if we were to eat this, it would taste terrible. Why? Because we haven't added the sugar. Now, I mentioned before that this is granulated sugar. There's a difference between granulated sugar and powdered sugar. They are both white, but if you were able to zoom in on this, you would actually be able to see the individual crystals. If you can see the individual crystals, it's granulated. If it looks more like the consistency of flour, that's powdered sugar. You don't want that for this part of the brownies, but you will want it a little bit later when you were going to make the frosting for these brownies. So we'll get to that eventually. Again, just as people differ with the amount of flour that they want, they're also going to differ with the amount of sugar. You can add anywhere between, a cup and a half, to even 2 cups of sugar. It completely depends on how sweet you want your brownies to be. If you like a really, really sweet brownie, add 2 cups. If you want a slightly bittersweet brownie, add a cup to a cup and a half. So I'm just going to sort of meet it in the middle here. I'm going to go about 1 3/4 cups of sugar. And, yeah, that's pretty good. So again, put it in here, and you're just going to keep stirring and stirring. And you'll want to add in your vanilla, just to help make that sugar work in a little bit better. And that's what you're going to do. So once you have all of your sugar incorporated, and you add your vanilla here, and you get a little bit more liquid, then you are going to, and we're going to add about 1 teaspoon of vanilla, just in case. So this is a 1/2 teaspoon that I've got here. I'm going to add in my teaspoon of vanilla. Right now, it kind of looks like this isn't going to get very liquidy, but you'd be surprised at what vanilla can actually do to make things liquidy. So I'm just going to take a minute, stir this all up, and we'll be right back. So after you put a little bit of elbow muscle into this, and I promise it's not going to look like it's going to go together, but if you just bear down a little bit and stir it up, or if you have a mixer, just use your mixer, save your arms, you're going to end up with a really thick batter that's going to look like this. And the more you stir it, the more combined things will be. But if you want to make sure that it's a little bit runny, because that'll make it easier to get it from here to your pan, which is where you're going to put things next. Now, you can use any kind of a pan that you want. This is a 9 by 13. That's how much brownies this is going to make. But if you don't have a big pan like this, you can use 2 smaller pans. That's fine as well, or even round cake pans. Whatever you have around the house will be just fine. You want to prepare your pan a little bit for these brownies. Even though they have the butter in there and the fat in there, they're still going to be fairly sticky in your pan. And so there's a couple different ways that you can prepare your pans. In the US, we have the sprays that you can put on there. If you have olive oil or vegetable oil, you can pour that in there. Or, easiest, because you've already used it in the recipe, just take a little bit of butter and just rub it in your pan. Make sure that you put it on the bottom of the pan and up and around the sides, especially in the corners. The place where brownies stick the most are going to be in the corners. And it doesn't have to be evenly spread, but you do want to make sure that you have some butter on every part of the surface. And so, that's what you need to do. I would say if you're looking for how much to start out with, maybe about 1 tablespoon of butter. And that's what you can do. Now, I mentioned before that brownies are customizable. If you right now took this brownie batter, put it into this pan, put it in your 350-degree oven, and baked it up, they'd be delicious. Everybody would love them. But there are some things you can do to make these even more wonderfully delicious. Let's see. Do you have a chocoholic in your family? Well, you can do what I'm going to do. You can add some chocolate chunks or chocolate chips. That's what we're going to do today. I've got about 1.5 cups of chocolate chips, and just stir them in. Now, if you have someone in your family who likes tree nuts, so almonds, walnuts, that kind of thing, right now, that's a good time to add these in. I happen to be allergic to those, so I don't ever add those in mine, but I hear that brownies with walnuts are especially good. Do you have someone in your family who loves coffee or likes mocha flavor? Instead of that 3/4 cup of boiling water that I burned my fingers with, you could actually take 1/2 cup of hot coffee and pour that in instead of that water, and now you have a delicious mocha brownie. Do you have someone in your family who likes the flavor of mint together with chocolate? You can, instead of that vanilla, you can add mint extract. Do you have someone in your family who loves peanut butter? Well, consider adding peanuts at this stage, or instead of some of that butter that you added, actually add in peanut butter. That's going to make your dough even thicker, but it's going to be even more delicious because peanut butter and chocolate, they just go together. It's amazing. So, However you want to customize it, come up with what you like and make sure you put that into your brownies. But do add something. It really will make your brownies just over the top. Today again, we are going for the double chocolate. Now I only put in one kind of chocolate chip. If you've got other kinds of chocolate chips around the house, there's Swoomy Sweet, there's the dark chocolate variety, there's even mint chips and peanut butter chips, there's butterscotch chips. Throw those in here. Have a smorgasbord of delicious flavors in your brownies. So once you've got that folded in together, you're just going to take that and dump it into your pan. And you don't have to be really careful about it when you're pouring it in, but you do want to make sure that you're getting some of the batter in all parts of the pan. And so if you have a spatula around, which I did before, but I seem to have moved it, that's always helpful in getting the dough out. But if not, just use your spoon. You can also use your fingers if you really want to. The joyous thing about using your fingers to do this is that you get to lick them later, and let's just be honest, this is really delicious. And why else do we cook but to eat what we cook? So might as well use your fingers, use your hands, get messy. This is one of the more delicious things to actually clean up. So take all of your brownie mix, make sure you push it over into all of the corners of your pan. Just like that. And the nice thing about when this is baking, it's going to even itself out, so it doesn't have to be exactly perfect. The last thing that you're going to do, and this is sort of my super secret trick for getting the air bubbles out and making these as dense and fudgy as they can possibly be. This is going to be loud, so ready yourself. All that does is that releases some of the air bubbles in there and lets them come out and helps compress the rest of the dough. So I'm going to do it one more time. And that's it. Put these into your preheated oven, 350 degrees. You're going to bake them for 25 to 35 minutes. You want to watch these. When the outside edges are just starting to get brown, just starting to pull away, that's when you're going to want to take the brownies out. These are still going to cook in the pan when you take them out and let them set to cool down, but you don't want to overbake them because then they're going to get dry, and nobody likes a dry brownie. It's not good. Stay away from dry brownies. So just when you start to see the outside edges getting brown and just starting to pull away just a little bit, that's when you want to take it out. So again, you're going to be between 25 and 35 minutes in a 350 degree Fahrenheit or 180 degrees Celsius oven, and we'll show you what they look like here in just a little bit. So while your brownies are baking, you can go ahead and start working on your frosting. Do you need to make frosting? No, you do not. Brownies are delicious without frosting. Everyone will love them. Should you make frosting? Absolutely, because brownies are better with frosting. Without frosting, brownies are great. With frosting, out of this world. You want to make the frosting, and I'm going to show you how. It's really simple and easy. Once your brownies are out of the oven, let them cool, and then add this frosting on top. We'll show you that in a bit. 5 ingredients for delicious brownie frosting that again can be customized if you want to. You got your dry ingredients, you have your powdered sugar, your powdered cocoa again, and then your wet ingredients, milk, melted butter, and vanilla. That's it. Very easy. So you're going to start out with your powdered cocoa. This is going to be about a half a cup of your powdered cocoa, more or less depending on how chocolatey you want it to be, but about that. It's going to be pretty good. Then you're also going to want to add in some of your powdered sugar. You're going for between 2 and 2/3 of a cup of powdered sugar here. So you're going to put these two in together, but you're not going to put all of this in. Just like we alternated the ingredients with the actual brownies, we're also going to alternate the ingredients with the brownie frosting. So you're just going to mix them together, and once those 2 ingredients are put together, then you're going to start adding in some of your wet ingredients. And again, following the alternating pattern, you're going to alternate between your milk and your butter. So first you're going to add about half of your milk, and this is 1/3 cup of milk. So just add your milk in, and you're going to stir this around. Now you'll notice I'm using a wire whisk. You don't have to, you could use a spoon, but I find that whisks are just slightly better for incorporating things into frosting. And you're going to see already, it's not starting to get liquidy yet, but you are starting to get clumps. That's good. Clumps you want, because eventually those clumps are going to work themselves out into a delicious and smooth frosting. So once you have your frosting mostly liquefied, then you're going to add in some more of your dry ingredient. Pretty easy, right? And so you're going to stir that around for a little bit, and you're going to find out that Eventually that's going to be pretty hard because now what was once wet is now going to start getting dry. And so once you reach the point where it's really hard to stir, like it's getting to be now, you're going to add in some more of your wet ingredient. So here's your butter. This is about 6 tablespoons of butter. And again, just add half of it and just keep stirring. And notice that once again, pretty quickly, it's going to get very liquidy. And that's what you're going to do. You just go back and forth between your liquid and your dry until you get this to be the consistency that you want it to be. If it's a really humid day out, you might actually need less liquid. If it's a really dry, cold day out, you might need more liquid. It's not an exact science, but as long as you start out with just over 2 cups of powdered sugar, a half cup of your chocolate, and a third cup of butter, or a third cup of milk, 6 tablespoons of butter, which actually is about a third cup, and a teaspoon of your vanilla. Keep stirring them together. Eventually you're going to get a nice, creamy, and delicious frosting for those wonderful brownies. So after 30 minutes in the oven, more or less, your brownies should look like this. They should be slightly darker around the edges, just starting to pull away, but the center should still have a nice, squishy, moist look. That's what you want in your brownies. You're going to let your brownies cool as completely as possible. Sometimes, you know, if you're making these to like take to someone, you sort of run out of time and you end up having to do this step a little bit earlier. But the cooler these brownies get, the easier it is and the better it is for putting on your frosting. So after you stirred and added in all of your ingredients, this is what your frosting should look like. It should be thick and dense, but it should be easy to smooth out. If your frosting is looking more liquidy, for example, if you can do this and your frosting is starting to run down the bowl, you probably want to add a little bit more of your sugar. If you can barely smooth this out at all, that means that it's just a little bit too dry and you need to add a little bit of milk. So take time to adjust it so you get your frosting to look a little bit like this. You can also customize this frosting. Instead of adding milk, you can add a little bit more coffee for your mocha brownies. If you want to have the mint flavor not in your brownies but in your frosting, you can do that too. Just swap out that vanilla for your mint. If you want to have peanut butter flavor frosting, you can, instead of some of the butter, you can add some peanut butter. So just play around with it until you find a change on this recipe that works for you. But this basic recipe is going to work out just great. Frosting these brownies is super easy. You take your frosting out of the bowl and you start to just layer it out on top of your brownies. The nice thing about doing brownies in a glass pan is that you can see how thick your frosting is going on, but it doesn't really matter. The more the merrier with frosting. Frosting is delicious. I don't know if anyone's ever told you this, and if you haven't found out how delicious frosting is, you should try it for yourself because it's pretty amazing. So you're just going to take the frosting, and if you do this with a spatula, it really helps because spatulas are just a little bit more flexible than most knives. And you're just going to spread it on as thickly or as thinly as you want. Now, you don't have to use all this frosting. This makes a nice amount of frosting, this recipe does. So if you have what you feel is too much, I know some people in my family don't like to have too much frosting on their brownies. Frosting left over is really good if you put it between 2 either graham crackers or other types of crackers. Put it in the freezer for about 10 minutes. It's really delicious. So if you have leftover frosting, you can do that. Also, if you have people around who might be staring at you longingly, asking for please just a little bit of the frosting, you can always leave a little bit in the bowl for them, and I'm sure that they would appreciate a little taste of the frosting. But the rest of it should go onto the brownies. Now, again, brownies are totally customizable. If you have changed nothing about this recipe, if this is just a chocolate brownie with a chocolate frosting, you could add something special on the top. So again, if someone likes the peanut butter flavor, sprinkle some chopped up peanuts on top, or some chopped up walnuts if you want. If someone wants to have some like a mint flavor, you could put some mint chips on top. Same with the peanut butter chips. So you don't have to put those flavors into the brownies. If you forgot and then you remembered, oh yeah, so-and-so really likes that, you can sprinkle it on. You also, if you wait until the end to add things, then you can customize it. You can put half in one and half in the other. Another really favorite thing that people like to do is put marshmallows on top of this to add sort of a special flavor. Today, because I have them and why not, I'm going to add sprinkles. Just make my brownies just a little bit more festive. And again, you're just going to sprinkle them on there. And that's it. Simple, easy, American brownies. It's all you have to do.